great. I'm really thrilled to be here. I teach election law, and basically Brennan Center does half my teaching for me. Whenever there's a question, we say, well, has the Brennan Center thought about it? And if they haven't, probably nobody has. And just the extraordinary work of the Brennan Center, and then I've followed Professor Melvin for years. Absolutely love his work, and honored to be with both of you. So I'm going to be brief. I'm going to just a law professor hat for 1 minute. This is constitutional. The court will allow it to happen. The most recent signals from the court in McComish case after Citizens United suggested that this kind of matching funds system would be constitutional. I think that's very important. Other kinds of matching fund systems are not, that are triggered by spending, but the low dollar match is. So there's a huge window to drive in here. Should not be a big concern. That's it for law. I'm supposed to be the reasonable professor. I'm not going to be. I think this is the fight. I really do. I think the fight is matching funds, and I think the fight is New York. Tell you one story about why I believe this. I almost ran for Congress in 2005, 2006 in Vermont. And so I did in a pretty small state. I did what you're supposed to do. You go talk to people. What do you need to do? Well, first you need to get $100,000 before the press is going to take you seriously. This is not big money, right? So then, okay, how do I raise $100,000? I make a list of 50 people that I know that will give me $2,000. So I want you to go through this process because it's such a radicalizing process for me. Just imagine for a second you're going to run. So we'll call them all John. So I thought about my friend John because he's rich. And he's very involved in internet fights. And he cares a lot about net neutrality. So I found myself thinking about John and his other rich friends, and thinking about things that I had thought about net neutrality. And so I spent a couple days thinking about net neutrality. I promise you, nobody in Vermont had ever approached me about net neutrality. And then I thought about my other friend, John. And my friend John cares enormously about gun control. And he and his wife donate a lot in the area of gun control. Well, I don't know how much you know about Vermont politics. It's not a big issue in Vermont. Again, I actually care about gun control. I actually care about net neutrality. But what I found in that first 4 days is that my mind was entirely occupied, oriented towards the concerns of John and John and John and John, none of whom were the constituents that I was thinking about. So if we'd had a matching fund system in Vermont at the time, instead of making a list of those 50 people who might give $2,000, which we're already talking the 1% right there, basically. I mean, you probably know that. I would have been thinking, okay, what is an issue that 1,000 Vermonters care about? What about dental care? Or what about credit cards? Or student loan payments? None of which, my wonderful friend John's, friends John, don't think about those things. They're not wrong not to think about them. But it would totally reorient my brain. And so why I care so much about this is that what I see as the function and the purpose of designing a campaign system is to create structures so that those who represent us are thinking as much as possible about all of us equally and orienting themselves as much as possible to all our interests equally. Now, they may not always agree with us, but they'll at least be thinking about our concerns about teeth and credit cards instead of the concerns of the 1%. So for me, that's why this is the game. Great example we see of that in the response to the financial crisis. Not the crisis itself is, I was involved in lobbying on Dodd-Frank. I think we were outspent in 2 years, a year per day, something like that. The amount of money we spent in a year was the amount of money the banks were spending in a day. I was talking to an old organizer about things like breaking up the banks and the financial transactions tax. And he said, look, the numbers on these are so high, it doesn't matter how we message it, which is unusual for anybody in DC to say. But these were, the numbers on like serious banking reform. Didn't happen. And we weren't the only ones who knew those numbers. Members of Congress knew those numbers. They saw the financial transactions tax numbers. This is a great populist issue, especially in response to the crisis. They're not touching it because they're thinking about John and John and John, and John and John and John are thinking about totally different things than the people in their district. 3. Super PACs. I assume there's going to be questions about that. They're a big deal. They're a huge problem. It's not trivial. This doesn't solve that. That said, in most races in the country, our job, and in New York, our job is to create a system where people can get to the level where they're heard. That's our job. And if there's enough money in the matching fund system so they can be heard in their district, super PACs are a problem. They're a threat. They're a fight. But who is going to run is going to change. How they're going to talk is going to change, and who they're speaking to is going to change. So while we separately try to change the court, the matching funds project can be amazingly important. 4th and last. I think the New York fight's really important for the country. People know that the system is corrupt, but they don't believe that there's a way to fix it. And I don't know that we have numbers on this, but I don't believe people know what fair elections is, and I believe they don't trust it when they hear it. That if they don't actually have some sense of how the mechanism works, it's like the Clean Skies Act and the Clean Ground Act and every other messaged idea, that it doesn't sound true. Well, I think the best way to get to public education is through a good old-fashioned street fight. The way that people can learn about how the fair election system works is to have the fight. Have politicians duking it out, accusing each other, explaining it. That works to me better than any amount of public education campaign. So I really want to win this one, but I really think it's worth fighting even if we don't.